Okay, hello everyone. Uh, Today in the fellowship, I would like to share a message from First Peter chapter 1, and it talks about uh, uh, how we need to continue in our faith and how we will be saved by faith. So let me share my screen. Okay, is everyone able to see the PowerPoint presentation? Oh, thank you. So the topic of the message is saved through faith, and this occurs in First Peter chapter 1. First Peter chapter 1 is a very, very powerful chapter, I feel. Probably I could put every verse here, but I just picked up verse 5 from this chapter. And in this book, Peter is trying to encourage Christians who have accepted Jesus Christ and they are faithful, but they are going through a hard time of trials and testing, and probably they are being tempted to quit and stop living by faith. So in verse 5 he says who, and he refers to these Christians as strangers and elect. So they were strangers because they were being, they were living differently. They were probably living righteously and believing that Jesus is the Messiah and living for the coming kingdom. And probably that is the reason, they were being persecuted, because they were living righteously. So he says, who are who are protected by the power of God through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. So he is encouraging them and reminding them of the salvation that God is wants to give them in the last time. So he's reminding them of their future salvation. And so this salvation that we will be saved into through living by faith is future, and it is at the end times. It is something that we do not fully and completely experience it now, but it has been promised, and it is something that we need to believe, even though we don't fully experience and see it right now. So that is the tough part. So this salvation has to do with the future, and that future needs to encourage us to live by faith. And so when we live by faith, God protects us, and God will make sure that we partake of this salvation that he has prepared for us. So here the power of God, it says here the power of God. That is another similar verse in Ephesians chapter 2, where the power of God is replaced by grace. So it's the same phrase, grace through faith. We are saved by grace through faith. So again, the focus of salvation is future, and this is something that has been promised in the scriptures. So let's look at some passages which helps us understand faith more. First, in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1, this is a great verse to understand what biblical faith is. It says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So the key part here is something, faith has to do with confidence and assurance of things that have been promised by God. things that are in future, which we don't completely and fully experience it now. And the scriptures often calls these things as things not seen or hope. So hope is something, of course, Romans explains that that we don't see. If we see and experience it fully, then it will not be called hope. So faith has to do with hope and things not seen. And it has to do with how we respond to it. And the example, the greatest example is Abraham. In Romans 4 verse 20, it says, he, that is Abraham, staggered not. So he did not waver in unbelief at the promise. Yes.
I think slides aren't switching. I just realized, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you see the slide now, the second one?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. So yes, so this is Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. Faith is the substance. So the word substance can, and it is being translated as assurance and confidence in other translations. Then Romans 4 verse 20, it is talking about Abraham as an example of faith. It says he staggered not. So the word staggered not is also translated as he did not waver in unbelief at the promises of God. So he staggered not at the promises of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God. So Abraham is a great example of someone who lives by faith. God promised him a great future. God promised him a great inheritance in the land flowing with milk and honey. When he had nothing, when he had no children, and not only that, when he couldn't have any children, he was old, his wife was old. So it's a great example of how by sight it was not there, right? It was like a complete hope or a dream. All he had was God's promise. But he responded in a way that the scriptures calls it faith. Like he never doubted it. He was not going back and forth in his obedience, but he was strong in faith. In verse 21, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised, he was able also to perform. And therefore, it was imputed or reckoned or put in account to him for righteousness. So this is a great example, I feel, of what does it mean to have substance and confidence in the promises of God, which we don't see or experience now. Then Hebrews 6 verse 19, it says, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul. So hope should be the anchor of our soul. And hope, again, is something that we don't see and experience. And anchor, of course, is a great picture of stability and steadfastness. It prevents the ship from getting shipwrecked. And we know the Bible also says that we can shipwreck our faith and we can fall away from our faith. So how do we not fall away from faith is by having, this confidence in the promises of God, that what he has promised, he is going to perform, just like Abraham, had the confidence. So next slide is faith, again, has to do with things not seen. In 1 Corinthians 2 verse 9, it says that, but as it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. So here Paul is saying that there are certain things, there are certain rewards, prizes, authorities, as we'll see in next passage, that God has prepared for them that love him, right? And the challenge is that we don't see those things now. We don't experience it. Uh, we only have it promised by the prophets in the scriptures. So faith has to do with things not seen. If we see those things, there is it is not faith, right? And we know in First Peter it talks about how their faith will end one day. The receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your soul. So there will come a time when faith will end, and those who have lived by faith will receive the salvation of their souls, which is these things, that God has prepared for them that love him. So in Matthew 20, this is a very interesting story. It kind of tells us what are these things that God has prepared for those who love him. This is a story of the mother and her two sons, I think James and John, coming to Jesus and telling him and asking him basically, the highest positions or to be closest to him in the coming kingdom. In verse 21, and he said to her, "What do you wish?" This is Jesus asking the mother. She said to him, "Command that in your kingdom these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and one on your left." But Jesus answered and said, "You do not know what you are asking for. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." So we notice here that Jesus is kind of surprised in two ways. One is like he's probably blessed and surprised by this woman and her son's, desire and good intentions. Like they have very good desires uh, to to be in the coming kingdom. But he also tells them that there is a high price to be paid. That he kind of helps them how much he can in one way by explaining that there is a high price to be paid for these possessions. And he doesn't say, that that what you believe is error or you're on a wrong track or something. uh, he knew that they are on the right track and they are asking the right things. But he reminds them that there is a great price to be paid, and that is that they would have to be completely obedient, right? Uh, and even in the face of suffering, because he was about to go through a lot of suffering because uh, that was the will of the Father. So he kind of helps them how much he could, but then in the end he said to them, "My cup you shall drink, but to sit on my right and left hand, this is not mine to give, but it is for those uh, whom it has been prepared by my Father." So there we see, it has been prepared. These positions have been prepared by the Father. So faith has to do with, desiring these the things that God has prepared for those who love him. Then faith has to do with eternal things, right? In 2 Corinthians 4 verse 18, while we look not at the things uh, which are seen, for things that are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So this is very important, right? Faith that we just heard of, that Peter is encouraging Christians who are going to trial and testing. They were going through persecution. They were not experiencing in their temporal life, these great promises, but it has to do with the eternal things, which we don't see now. Then faith has to do with future judgment. In Hebrews 11 verse 7, it says, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet. So God told Noah of a future judgment, right? He warned Noah that this judgment is coming because of the disobedience and sin of the people, and that moved Noah to respond in certain way. He did not neglect that one, which he could have, because he was not experiencing that judgment at when God told him. In fact, probably I've heard that he had not even seen rain that way before. And when God told him of a worldwide flood, it was kind of very, very hard to imagine or even picture those things, because he had never seen those things. But he did not neglect it, and he was completely dedicated, and we know that because he built a huge ark, right? So we saw his response by his actions. He prepared an ark for the saving of his soul, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. So faith has to do with future judgment also. The Bible not only promises the good rewards for those who love him, but it also has to do with, there is a day of recompense. People who are completely disobedient and unrepented and defiant against God, they will need to give an answer to God one day. Okay, so the judgment is also part of living by faith. Then Hebrews 11 verse 6, faith has to do with the positive, right? The rewards. And reward also, the word reward can be used in negative and positive way. Reward can also be in a negative way for the things that were not pleasing to God. So Hebrews 11 verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. So this is such a great verse. It really tells us how much God is pleased by faith. And faith is what we just went through. Faith has to do with things that we don't see and experience. Faith has to do with future, and they are just right now promises given in the scriptures. But when we obey those and we live by those promises, it really, really blesses God. It really pleases him. For he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. So faith, is motivated by reward. Faith knows that God is, and he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him and want to please him. Then defining more, what is faith? Faith is also when Christ is dwelling in our heart. In Ephesians chapter 3 verse 17, that Christ may dwell in your heart by faith, that you be rooted and grounded in love. So Christ is the Messiah, right? The word Christ, of course, that's Jesus Christ, but the attitude and the way that Jesus Christ lived, that should be in us. And Jesus was a completely obedient son. He had a spirit of humbleness, meekness, and he was fully obedient to the Father. And to have Christ dwell in us is to have that attitude, is to have that mind. And when we do that, we are living by faith. Also, 1 Peter 1:8, whom Christ, that is Jesus Christ, having not seen, you love. So again, we have not seen Jesus, but we love him. And we know that to love Jesus is to obey him. In John chapter 14, verse 15, we are obedient to Christ because he is our Lord. He's our King. Whom, though you see him not, yet believing, you rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. So why? Because why? If you are doing this, why you can rejoice and have joy unspeakable is because there is great blessings and rewards, prepared for you by the Father. That is the reason Peter is saying you can rejoice and have joy unspeakable. So we should, increase our faith. If faith is something that we constantly are trying to grow and improve in. When we first becomes Christians, we probably don't have great faith or this kind of faith that Abraham had. It takes time and it takes more and more effort from our side. And the Bible says that faith can grow when we hear the word of Christ. In Romans 10, verse 17, faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. And of course, that is, studying the scriptures, meditating on the scriptures, spending time in prayer, thinking of these promises over and over again, fellowshipping in church and talking to each other about these things will produce more and more faith in our life. Our faith will become strong, and we need that. Also in 2 Timothy 3 verse 15, and that from child you have known the sacred writings or the sacred scriptures, which are able to give you the wisdom that leads to salvation through faith. So scriptures are so important, right? Without this scripture, without reading the scriptures and meditating and understanding the scriptures, we cannot have this faith. And the scriptures also, this is also not, this is also specific, the specific promise of the scriptures, which has to do with the Messiah, the Christ, about the coming kingdom. The gospel, the good news, what the apostles were preaching, that is what that is what is the word of Christ in Romans 10. And that will produce this kind of faith that will give us the salvation of the coming kingdom. Then we should constantly examine ourselves. In 2 Corinthians 13 verse 5, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. So this is our part, right? We need to constantly evaluate our life and see if we are living in the faith. Prove your own self or test your own self. Know ye not your own self, how that Jesus Christ is in you. So this is faith, that we can see if Christ is dwelling in us, the Messiah is dwelling in us. Whether we have his attitude, his focus, right? Even Jesus was looking forward to this great hope that the Father has prepared for him. Except you be reprobate. So the end of this verse is quite sobering because it also has a warning. The word reprobate means to be disapproved. So Paul is saying that if you don't have Christ dwelling in you, if you don't have faith, then you can be disapproved, right, of this salvation. So it is quite important, right, so that we live by faith, because we don't want to be disapproved of the salvation when we stand in the presence of Jesus Christ. So as we examine, what faith has evidence, right? In Hebrews 11 verse 1, we saw that it has evidence of things not seen. So James chapter 2 verse 18, but someone may say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without the works, and I will show you my faith by my works. So this is like a very, very clear verse saying that both faith, the confidence that we have, the assurance that we have, would also be shown in the works we do. So works is something that is visible, right? It is not hidden. Just like fruits on a tree, they are not hidden. It can be easily spotted or noticed. And James then again goes on to give the example of Abraham, which we just saw in Romans chapter 4. It says, was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son upon the altar? So we know this is one of the greatest example that we have in the scriptures, that Abraham was so convinced and he was so like persuaded by the promises of God that he took his obedience so far as much as he was going to offer up his own son. So that confidence in the coming kingdom, the confidence he had was in the resurrection, right? Because he knows that Isaac cannot die, because God had already told him that the son it is through this son you will receive the promise. So he showed that confidence by offering up his own son. So the thing is that our faith should be seen, right, in our actions. Then as we work, how our attitude is important. Philippians chapter 2 verse 14, do all things without murmuring and disputing. So murmuring and complaining as we are doing God's work shows a lack of faith. And good works should not be accompanied by murmuring and complaining, but with joy and obedience, right? Like not doing it as if it's a burden for us. So in closing, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 58, of course, this is how even Paul concludes his huge exhortation and teaching on the resurrection. He says, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil or labor is not in vain in the Lord. So we need to be, steady and immovable and abounding in the work of the Lord. Right? That is how we know that we have faith, and that is how we know that we are on the path, right? On the path to attain the promises that God has promised, which First Peter and there's several verses which says that is salvation, that is redemption for us. So yeah, so that's all I have for the word of the day. Stop sharing now. So we can open it up now for any comments, questions, or more thoughts on this subject.
I have something, Rudy. I like the way you started this off, I mean, I'm not going to go through the era that I was taught about what faith is, some kind of feathery thing, that's unattainable. But I like the way that you positioned this, because I personally now see, 2 Corinthians 13 about evaluating our own life. And someone once said to me, if you straighten yourself out here and now, while you have time on planet Earth, what do you think repentance is all about? Quit arguing with God over what it is. Quit trying to minimize what you think the works of the law is that Paul said, and get down to the brass tacks of becoming like Christ. You could avoid a lot of error. And you can't blossom unless you can't even have the fruit of the Spirit. The outward evidence of the internalization of Scripture and your walk with the Lord, that just doesn't happen because you're a Christian. There is a work to be done within you, and as well as outside work, with other people to, be persuaded that, patience, wasn't, you didn't have that in a day. And, I'm going to go over here for a minute. When I came home, my husband kind of looked at me, and Marsh was kind of looking at me like, what are they looking at, Lord? It was like I was a little Moses with a little glowy face. And today, I know, I'm like, they're looking at me and I'm feeling kind of stupid, and I'm like, what is going on here, Lord? But I noticed it. It was just the strangest thing. So today, this is just a real witness about what I just said. My husband comes up to me and he says, well, I've got bad news. Our rent went up. And of course, my hair stands up and I run around and do crazy things. And I came back and figured some stuff out. And I said, well, that's okay. I figured it out and I'm nice and calm. He said, I didn't want to tell you the other day because you came home and you had such peace in your face. I just didn't have the heart to disrupt your peace. I'm like, they saw that because I was around Christians for 4 days. And I'm telling you, these are the highlights of understanding that this stuff is so real, and who we hang out with can improve our life and even change our mannerisms to notice, some of the needed tweakings. So, and the warning is, I don't want God to say, or Jesus say, no, I never knew you, Donna. I never knew you. Though you profess to be a Christian, it's unacceptable to me the way you lived your life with really no fruit, nothing added, to your name, no good works, and I love the way you tied it in. It's just so obvious to me. I like the way you presented it. Very well done. Thank you. I know I went off on this rabbit trail, but I just wanted to kind of get in there with the evidence of Holy Spirit and also the presence of peace, how other people can see it. Other people notice.
Right.
I thought that was just such a
Yeah.
valuable statement.
Yeah, that fruits are that, right? Fruits is something that other people enjoy.
They see
Other
it.
people
Yeah,
other people benefit of it. It's not
sure.
for the person himself or herself in one way, right? So it's a good analogy that
Yeah.
others notice. Yes, thank you. Yes, John.
Actually, it was me, John, and I I was talking to him about the verse where you read where it says faith is the assurance of things hoped for. And so I asked whether that, that word faith there is, the Greek word pistis, and it has more than one potential meaning. It can mean faithfulness, it can mean trust. And so I was asking about which definition it is there, because I had always, I guess, really, I've always thought of it as just believing in or trusting in. But since it says it's the assurance of things hoped for, I'm I'm wondering if maybe it's not faithfulness, because it's faithfulness to Christ that enables us to have I don't know, certainty, or, feel confident, I guess maybe would be the better way to put it, that, we will receive the promise or promises that we have. So anyway, that's just something I thought I'd bring up. I haven't actually, like studied into it. I just had this question. So, and I asked it of John, and he said, well, it sounds like it probably could be faithfulness, right?
It's certainly what First Peter says about assurance of salvation. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not, sorry, I won't be able to comment much on that. I didn't study those words that way. It's the word, I think the word believing and faith are probably believing is a verb or no.
Yeah,
Faith is
so faith is going to be the noun, that's pistis. To believe is the verb, and it's pistuo. And they primarily mean, pistis primarily means faithfulness. That's its primary definition. And then it can also mean trust. It can mean a belief. And it can also be a token of trust. It can mean that as well. And it's a funny word in their culture too, because it had cultural meaning, not just language meaning, but specific cultural ideas. When grace and faith are used together, especially, it's a cultural exchange in certain kinds of cultural relationships, what's called the patron-client relationship, which we don't really have in our culture, at least in the West. We don't have that culture anymore, like they did in Rome and throughout the Roman world, where you would have a person of higher station would be a patron, and then people in lower stations would be in connection with them, be their followers, maybe even part of their household and that kind of thing. And so they were the clients. And in that exchange, in their language, they would use the terms grace and faith, pistis and charis, to mean that the patron would have grace towards the clients. And what that meant was that they would provide them favor, protection, jobs, that kind of stuff. And in exchange, the clients, the people who were in association with them would provide faithfulness. So they would be a trusted and loyal client of that patron. And so the words have those elements going on in the New Testament as well.
Yes, that makes it quite clear. Edgardo, please go on.
Thank you, Rudy. We have a good subject here. Faith is really very, very important in our ministry. And I love the verse that you have included there, Romans chapter 10, verse 17, that faith is being developed by hearing the word of Christ. And also the example of Abraham that you mentioned, they are really, really powerful example. Abraham, for that matter, is a very, very powerful example. I just want to say one statement, Rudy. Number one, the only way to really show our faith is by living in faithfulness. That's the only demonstration that we can really share if we are really having faith, living in faithfulness. Uh, if you live in faithfulness, then uh, you can show it can be shown that you really have faith in God. Uh, if you are not faithful, you don't have faith. If you have faith, you are faithful. You are doing everything that you know that will bring glory and that will please God because you have faith in God and you are really living in faithfulness. That's the only thing that I could say, Rudy. Thank you for the topic. It's a good subject.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jackson.
Yeah, I was same thing that Edgardo mentioned there, the faith coming by hearing and hearing by the word of God. And you had mentioned meditating on the word. And I had, it's still a newer thing for me to basically reorient myself reading the scripture through the lens of all these places that in your mainstream Christian learning experience you learn just mean belief or trust, and then shifting to add the dimension of faithfulness or loyalty to that understanding when you read those passages. And so all these faith passages that you brought up for me were just really interesting to think about as you were talking about them. And that one stood out because you had added the comment of meditating on the word, and it just made me think, okay, well, if I take this perspective, that John and Lisa were mentioning and Ricardo as well, and I take the word and it could mean potentially all or more than one, trust, loyalty, faithfulness comes by hearing, and hearing comes by the word of God. It just made me think about also the word comes rather than like say goes or because um you know all of us constantly can have the opportunity to be thinking about what other people need to be doing, and how other people need to change. And it's you know in this verse here, to me, and whatever, maybe I'm not interpreting it correctly, but it just gives me the insight that faithfulness in my own life is going to be developed. It's going to come through me hearing the word of God and, thinking about that and what that means about my life, not about our lives or about your life, but what am I supposed to be doing in my life? And anyway, I just thought that was really interesting because it's true, right? And it's if we aren't just washing our minds in the truth of the word, then it'll be easy to live a life that is not faithful or trusting, because we'll be thinking thoughts that come from somewhere else. And so, yeah, I'm just, I could say more things, but I don't want to go on forever. But I was just earlier this morning, I was thinking about the verses, Matthew 6:33, as we all know, seek first the kingdom of God, which we learned more about this weekend. And so seek first God's reign and rule in your life, and then all these things will be added unto you. And then the Micah verse, I forget, he was 6:8, where it's like, act justly or have mercy and walk humbly with your God, whatever the exact phrasing was. And it's like, you know, if that's the primary concern of a person, that they're seeking first to have God's authority demonstrated by how they live, and then they're just walking humbly with him and desiring to do what is right by anyone they come across, everything will get taken care of. So anyway, I'll stop soapboxing now.
Amen. Yes, John and Lisa.
So just to kind of add a little bit to that, what Jackson was talking about. So it's the easiest way to describe the primary definition of pistis is to use the word faithful, but pistis is a noun and faithful is an adjective. And so the actual definition, that primary definition, means to be someone or something in which trust can be placed. That's what the primary definition means. So when you see it used in Romans 10:17, where it says faith comes by hearing and hearing a report of the word of Christ, that's a really good example of something you can put your trust in comes from the word of God.
Awesome. You made me think the word dependable could be a way to describe it.
Yeah, dependable is another good. It's the concept of being a person who is described by faithfulness or dependableness. Yeah. Loyalty, faithfulness, that kind of thing.
What a great definition, John, of faith, because that other stuff, that you have to have some puffed up face to do a Star Wars issue. You know what I mean? Mysticism. God bless our brothers and sisters. May we meet them to pull them out of that heresy kind of doctrine. Because when I think of having faith in the scriptures and in Jesus, it makes life so much easier for me, where I take my eyes off of Donna Lee and then I put them on the immutability of who the Lord is, the greatness of what the scriptures expound that he is all about, and not try to muster some sort of metaphysical thing within myself to get me all screwed up like I was before. Just for me, it's just, I love the way that you took a big subject and then broke it down. It's not a simple subject, it's very complex, and broke it down to mean, yes, can you trust in the words, literally, from Jesus? Can you trust in that promise of everlasting life? I'm starting to use the word everlasting life too, instead of eternal life, from something that you said, John, bearing different weights in my mind where I can change up how I think. And, what I put my trust in is something more credible, something that I can rely fully on. This is my life. I have to depend on something to get me from point A. I have to trust in words and relationship. It's through the freedom of my will. I have to exercise my willingness. It's not this metaphysical thing just because I got sort of born again somewhere, on an altar. And it's walkable, but it's also easier to understand when where do I put my trust? What am I trusting in? So the Bible has become alive in the last 15 years more than ever. It's alive for me. And I get a lot when I come to these fellowships from just about everybody. I sort of borrow your phrase. I'm borrowing the phrase from John Truitt. I borrow phrases a whole lot when I'm explaining things to other people. If I am without words myself. So I just love the definition now of faith. At one time, it made me cringe because it was all dependent upon little Donna having some sort of great big thing going on inside of herself. And it's very, very disconcerting, that some of our brethren still teach those heresies. So when you learn truth, it just, I don't know, it just fits better with the God, that issued forth his word. It fits better with the life of Jesus Christ. It just fits better with what love is.
Thank you, Rama. Let me stop the recording now. Okay, thank you for everyone who heard this on YouTube. And if you would like to join us, you are more than welcome. Please send us an email and contact us on Allegiance to the King website. Thank you.